So I'm excited for this next Rebels with a Heart. Welcoming my dear friend Trey Whitney. Welcome to the show, man.
Thank you. Excited to be here.
I've been looking forward to this conversation for a little bit. Ever since we had the chance to meet in Vegas at the Tony Hsieh Award, I just felt immediately the connection with you, with our work and what you're doing, and just yeah, it's one of those moments where you feel like you've known someone a really long time. I had that sense with you. So,
Absolutely. It's like
so
Soul Brothers. I was happy to make the connection.
awesome. Well, likewise. So for the first off, tell the audience a little bit about who you are, what you're about, what you're doing. That's a very wide ranging conversation right there.
It is. Again, thanks for the opportunity. I like to describe myself as the invitation. And the reason I say that is because I feel like in today's world, there's so much noise. And I consider myself an invitation for someone to experience themselves. And how do people experience themselves? Through their story. And so I'm really, really curious. And I bring a heart-centered perspective to engaging with folks in any relationship, whether it's professional, as an HR executive, or as a friend, a son, a brother, a partner. I think when people share their stories, they really express their fears and their values. And that's a great way for people to really observe themselves and choose whether they want to elevate or if they want to stay where they are. And so that's how I describe myself, as really bringing an opportunity for individuals to experience themselves, be inviting, and do it from a place of hopefully elevating, right? And having that opportunity to really be at their best. And so that's my own personal journey. I feel like me really taking the time to understand who I am, both light and shadow, has brought me into a place where I feel whole. And wholeness to me is one of the ultimate gifts and experiences in life that I love to be completely connected to.
Awesome, man. That's really well said. And I resonate with a lot of what you just shared. So is that something that being the invitation to experience themselves, was that something that came naturally to you? Was that something that you cultivated? What's the process by which you came to that realization? That's a pretty profound statement.
Yeah, I think, Derek, over the arc of my life, from childhood through um, even my professional life, I think that's been individuals' responses to me, is that, I have this genuine connection and this genuine care in which I approach my relationships. And, having worked in corporate, I know there's a lot of power over, power with. And I think sometimes just taking the opportunity to use softening and opening language and invitation to me isn't about force.
Yeah.
It's about really just providing the space for
Yeah.
people to really have that opportunity. And so it's come with lots of, what I would say, honing it through my professional career and then my own self work, because even with my inner voice and inner critic, it's always an invitation, right? It's always an
Yeah.
invitation to go one way or go the other way, or be who you are. And so
Yeah.
that's how I perfected it.
So that's a nice segue into kind of a question I often ask, which is how does that show up for you as the rebel with a heart? Like you mentioned about the construct of corporate power over, power with. How have you, quote unquote, shown up as a rebel with a heart through your career, through that environment, through other environments? Does that resonate with you? Does it not?
It resonates a lot. Funny story, Derek. Last night I was sleeping and I wasn't ready to fall into deep sleep. And so I realized I was in my head. And there was a moment when I was laying there, and all of a sudden I could just feel my hand literally on my head. And I said, drop into your heart. And I moved my hand from my head to my heart. And wow, what a different feeling. I would encourage your listeners to do that. Is that when you're really inside of your head, just put your hand on your heart and you can feel just the difference in frequency and vibration. And so for me, working in corporate and the different industries that I've worked in, it's always been performative, right? It's always been about something extrinsic. And really thinking about the heart, particularly when you're a human resources professional, I think it shifts things in a couple of ways. A, you realize that everybody has value, right? Even if they're not going to remain with the organization, they're still worthy. They're still someone that's worth the care and the consideration. And then I think it's just how you show up. You show up with that kindness and compassion, which I think sometimes can get overlooked in trying to just be really hard driven with results
Yeah.
and treating individuals as assets. So that's been just a couple of ways in which I've taken this notion of leading from the heart and just really using it as a mantra to be able to be more kind,
Yeah.
compassionate when in my approach.
I'm curious, what did you notice? Like, describe your experience moving from the head to the heart. Like, what did you observe? Be specific if you don't mind. I think that's an interesting exercise that you just described.
Well, I think, I describe it as the rabbit hole. It was a bit of a loop when I was in my head. I had multiple thoughts. It felt like layers and layers of thoughts that were, I was all trying to solve and trying to conquer, if you will. And when I went to my heart, there was just like, just be like, it will all work out. Just be in a state of being and allowing. And what's interesting, the things that I was overthinking, there was just either clarity with it or it was just acceptance. And I felt better. My breathing was more relaxed. My heartbeat was at a more stable state. And so, yeah, I believe that, from every state, whether it's psychological or physical or emotional, that heart centered just made it completely in resonance. And in a word that I love to use, harmony with everything that was going on
Yeah.
at that particular moment.
Did you, for lack of a better label, did you notice like new information in that experience? Like in the process of what you were working with, did you find different information that came through?
Yeah, I would describe it as a frequency. And yes, definitely new information. And then my relationship with that information.
Okay.
As you know, we're in relationship to everything. And so even the thoughts that I had in my head, they were stress inducing. They felt like they had some urgency to it. But when I took my focus to the heart, it was all about it's going to be okay. Just focus on being, not doing. And then the clarity I had versus 4 or 5 choices relative to a particular problem or situation in my life, there was one clear, what I would call frequency that felt like the right thing to do. And so to me, it's like that muscle memory, right? The pendulum actually focused where I should spend my time and spend
Yeah.
my effort.
Fascinating. I know you have a very kind of intentional self practice. Have you done this work in the context of your HR career? Have you actually worked with leaders or other colleagues actually doing this type of, for lack of a better word, harmonization in the context of business?
Absolutely. A couple of things that I do is oftentimes when you're in some discussion, whether heated or if the stakes are high, I think the stakes are always high in the business context. I just encourage people to breathe. That's always a practice that I think that brings people to their heart, brings them to presence, which oftentimes in corporate you're not because you're from one meeting to one meeting, your context switching and the like. The other is I always try to take people outside of work into a zone where they feel empowered. And so oftentimes you talk to executives who
Yeah.
do things outside of work, like boxing or singing or playing the piano or playing a particular instrument and find the ways in which they get joy and where they feel they're at peak performance. And it brings them to a place where they're much more in tune and in harmony with everything around them versus being performative and trying to exact some power over a situation.
Gotcha. I'm curious, why did you choose to work in the field of human resources?
Well, it felt like it chose me. I originally went to school to be an actuary, so I really was leaning on my analytical brain, and something clicked for me. The funny story is there was this there was this fraternity for people who work in risk management,
Okay.
and I thought the fraternity was going to be all about playing and socialization. And I get to the meeting and they're like, oh, we're going to study for all of the exams you have to take to become a fellow to be an actuary, which was completely not why I was there. And so to me, that was a God whisper to say, hey, this is not the career that you want. But what it did do is it kind of awakened the fact that I was able to bring the analytical side of my brain along with the creative side, and that people can be can be what I would say enhanced or amplified through bringing data and collecting data from the human experience and human potential. And so, at a relatively young age and enough time for me to complete college, I recognized that, and I kept taking that frame to how I approach my job as a human resources or human capital professional.
So how did you tell us what the journey, if you will, the path that you walked through and the different stages and steps and organizations that you've gone through and how that's elevated your own experience and how you're serving others that way?
Yeah, I mean, if you look at my career story, there's really three significant paths. So one, I started in automotive and started working in a more manufacturing labor union environment, and so that was really helping me learn kind of the acumen of HR or the tactical side of HR. And I was privileged to be able to have some really great mentors that helped me navigate working in that environment. And really, to me, I unlocked this tension between management and employees, and really
Yeah.
became a bridge to the two. And then my second phase was within the consumer packaged goods space, and that's where I really learned bringing together the brand of a company with the brand of HR. And so I took that deep, what I would say, technical acumen in the
Yeah.
human resources or human capital space, and just really started to tell stories of how people can drive business. And then moving into tech, which was, I would say, the last arc of my career, was really all about bringing intention and bringing all three of those areas together, bringing the story, bringing the HR acumen, but bringing really clear intention, because as many people think of, the tech industry could be considered a little bit of the wild, wild west, but they do a lot of good. And I
Yeah.
think when you bring people to attention, to attention, what do they focus on? I think it brings impact. And so across my career, working across multiple industries and in different companies in global capacities, that's how the arc of my career is kind of netted out to this point.
Fascinating. And so I know we have a shared friend in Joe McClinsky. He was actually on Rebels not that long ago. We had a really fun
Yeah,
chat. You should listen to that episode when it goes live.
for
How did
sure.
your worlds intersect? Because it's part of how we all connected. So I'd love to hear how you all, met and the affinity there and the work that because I know you're doing things together as well. So I'm curious to see where that activates for you talking about that.
Yeah, so I met Joe through a mutual friend. I was at a place where I was doing some personal development and leadership development, and I met a friend of Joe's when I was being called to come back to the East Coast, to Maryland. At the time, I was living in California, and our friend Jason connected me to Joe, and we just really hit it off. Both on the professional front of just really looking at the future of work and how work is done and how you really bring intention to that. And then on the personal side, just really getting into a lot of personal development work and using plant-based medicine. And so we had that connection and have been able to really access some really unique places and spaces around my own essence and existence. And Joe has been both a friend, a facilitator, a guide in both fronts. And so I've been able to work with him in his organization for some clients, doing some work in the human capital space, and continue to enjoy a great relationship with him today as he continues to provoke us
Yeah.
and invite us to really think about the future of work.
Yeah. Yeah, we definitely can have some fun times jamming on this topic. I am curious since you brought it up, and it's only come up a couple times in Rebels conversations, and it's been a couple of my more favorite ones. What has that plant medicine journey done for you through your development, both professionally but also personally? How has it shaped you or changed you? How has it, back to your word about wholeness, how has it influenced that? How has it influenced your integration of light and shadow, as you described at the beginning? I'm curious. I think, yeah, I'm curious, but I think a lot of people would be curious to hear more about that.
Yeah, a few things come to mind. So I talked about my career arc, and I'll talk about
Yeah.
my career arc with plant-based medicine. So the first is it was really about intense healing, from childhood trauma, ancestral trauma. I really came to the work because I was raised in a very dogmatic evangelical home and was really trying to um, find the love and compassion out of the relationship with God, whereas I was raised in a more guilt, shame, sin type of relationship with
You were raised in Maryland, right? You grew up there?
raised in Maryland. Yes, yes, yeah. And so really was really about deep healing work. And as it relates to light and shadow, you have this connection where God is all of these great things in terms of light and love. But when you're dealing with your own, I would say, healing and trauma, plant-based medicine to me gave me such a gentle, healing, informative path to be able to move through my healing space. Then the next part was as I continue to heal. And so to me, it is truly a journey. It's never done. And so you continue to learn how to navigate that. Then I started exploring it from a creative side and said, hey, I'm a person, I grew up playing the piano. I tend to be more left brain in terms of my corporate experience and otherwise. And so being able to tap into all of the infinite wisdom and intelligence that's out there and be able to use that and integrate it in terms of light and shadow into my work. And then I would say the third arc for me is really being of service. I think that, through whatever your modality is, whether it's a traditional religion or meditation or some other access to self-mastery and divine access, there's this, to me, there's this need to be of service to the greater good and the greater consciousness. And so now I bring those three things to bear: the healing, really integrating the light and the shadow, really using it for creativity, and then being of service to others and helping to be a positive, force or amplification for the broader and the greater good.
Amazing. And how do you see, so we share a lot of overlap in our belief in that way. How do you see businesses and with the capitalist system being a platform that can be used for that purpose, right? That's in some ways that was a part of the origin of Rebels with a Heart, right? Which is that is the throughput, if you will, that change can happen at an accelerated pace. How do you see that evolving through your new perspective on this?
Yeah, and thanks for the opportunity. I think Rebels with the Heart is absolutely a great example of it. Just to get theoretical for a little bit, I believe that business is it's a frequency. It's consciousness, and it's a group of people that are working towards a common good. And if they have the right intention, they can use that currency to better the world, to better themselves, to better each other. And so I really, as I think about it, as everything is energy and capitalism and business is a frequency, I do believe that a collection of humans can be united and galvanized towards a force of good. And so I think as you connect it to whatever your modality of spirituality is bringing a presence and bringing wholeness to what you do and having that intention, then it's only going to elevate and create a much bigger and better impact. And so I think, there are people who consciously and unconsciously know that that their thoughts can be turned into things and that their attitudes can determine that altitude. If you use that in a positive way, I believe that capitalism is a great platform to be able to be a solution for a lot of the world's problems, both known and unknown.
Amazing. Well, so to that point, that's a good, nice transition to the next phase. So you talked about the different chapters or phases that you've gone through so far in your HR career. I know you're evaluating kind of the next shift even now. What do you see for Trey moving forward? Where do you see your contribution? Where do you see your service? Where do you see your role? Where do you see what do you see for your thoughts creating a frequency and actually manifesting into a reality right now?
Absolutely. I mean, I think, continue to be that invitation. I think that's really a place of resonance for me. And for that, I think leadership journeys go beyond what I describe as my personal journey, but I think all leaders can benefit from being on an intentional journey around integrating their light and their shadow and being whole and using that to elevate and make an impact. And so, how I see that playing out is really providing peak experiences. And again, peak experiences can be, it can translate into a number of ways, whether it's, you spending time in the gym and really connecting your body, your mind, and your emotions to some type of peak performance that gives you intelligence, that gives you access to being at your best. It could be playing sports, enjoying and engaging in music. It could be spending time with friends in some type of play of some sort. I think those peak experiences, if we take the time to evaluate them and be a witness of them and derive intelligence from it, can be a great source, a great amplifying source as a leader to be able to use that to enhance your leadership and then be able to have the right relationships. I think, for me, there's such a strong inner voice. It is the one voice that you're constantly in relationship with. And so when you're able to take that relationship through peak experiences, through a zone of brilliance, you can continue to grow and accelerate.
What is that voice telling you? I'm curious because you mentioned this a couple of times, and I think you've gone into a deeper path around spirituality than we usually do, which I personally love this, and I love every interview is its own unique feel. But what is your voice saying to you, like as you ponder this?
Well, I had to confront a few things. First of all, I think on the positive side, it's like, hey, you have everything you need to be able to enter into this unknown, uncharted territory, and really embrace that inner voice that I believe encompasses all intelligence. At the same time, there are some voices of worthiness and rejection, right? When you're in a corporate setting, there's a much, in my opinion, safe and secure environment to be able to express yourself and be a leader. But then when you're trying to do something on your own, or when you're trying to derive different relationships, there can be this unworthiness that stems from either internal forces or external forces. And so for me, the path is really confront those voices and understand where they're coming from. And then how do you navigate it? What I've recognized is that whether it's trauma from childhood or more recent events, your body keeps the score. And so it's not about completely letting it go or removing it, but how do you navigate it? How do you remain in control against forces that sometimes can come to kind of throw you off? And so I continue to connect to that frequency.
It's cool. First of all, I appreciate you're using language that's very much in resonance with the Life Guides brand and mission, obviously navigating and guides and the work and the purposefulness of that. I think it's what you just said, though, a moment ago. I just want to call attention to it. You actually referred to the corporate environment being a safe space for expression. And I think that's a really interesting statement because it's such in some ways, a statement that many people would find to be charged, right? Some people are, is it really safe? Is it not safe? There's a lot of discussion around full expression, what that means, and the whole self and the whole purpose and the whole person. And I think it's really interesting that you said that in the context of, you talked about your process of looking at layers and old systems building on top of new systems being built upon old systems. And you and I both know through, integral theory that part of the process for upgrading is based on infusing the elements of what's working and then allowing them to intermediate into those that are ready to be kind of upgraded, right? And I think that it's a really fascinating time that we're in with that tension and that for lack of a better term, I'll say conflict gently, or isn't exaggerated, of what's going on, but like there's a friction that's happening in the systems that we have right now, and it's being challenged and molded from all different directions. And to your comment, again, just to thread it for you and for us and for our listeners, you talked about intentionality and the intentionality that you and the HR professionals and leaders and people of all kinds can play right now in threading a more beautiful tapestry, for lack of a better term, right? Where there is that safety, there is that safety to exist and build, safety to be, safety to thrive, safety to be vulnerable, to fail, to learn, right? And I think we're all experiencing that and trying to figure it out in this really fast-paced, technologically driven world that we're all, frankly, upgrading in real time, right? And I just wanted to call attention to that since I think you brought it out.
I think it's a great area to focus on. First of all, I think, I've said it a few times today. I think a few things come to mind. First of all, you're in relationship to everything in this world. And I think even as it relates to your job and the company that you may work for, you're constantly in relationship to that job. And I like to describe people as prisms, right? And prisms allow for light to come in and refract into many different colors. And so the notion of bringing your whole self to work, I like it because I think it's an invitation. It's a metaphor for being at your best. But there are different versions of you that show up in different contexts with your family, with your friends. And so to me, what that metaphor does is invite people to go inside and to their light, because that to me is the first step of safety. Of course, the environment needs to have a culture and policies and practices that make it safe. But I would remind people to start with themselves and then make sure that there is comfort and harmony with who they are and then how they connect to the world. And even with the great tech apocalypse, they call it, with all of the layoffs and so forth, even after you left a company where you had a relationship where you thought it would have lasted longer, or it would have ended in a different or more ideal way, you're being brought back to yourself. And so I think it's an opportunity for people to really say, who am I? How has work created an identity for me? Is it healthy? Is it safe? Is it balanced? And I think as you show up in your best light, then the systems around you will hopefully ultimately elevate to your frequency, or it may not be a place for you. And then you will go somewhere where you will be in your best light. So I think there's a lot of unpacking of what you just described, because these systems are both made up of individuals and the collective, and really dissecting it down to the relationship that people are having with themselves and how they're showing up, and whether they're bringing a elevated frequency, or are they bringing a lower frequency to that environment, is such an integral question for me.
Yeah, so that's a really it's an interesting point you just made there. Is there, so back to the tactical, right? And you've given some examples already, but is there a way or a method that you would encourage people who maybe don't have as much practice in doing this to start that exact kind of inquiry, inward look, reflection? And to your point, even just something as simple as how do you evaluate, how do you detach to evaluate your own frequency so that you can reframe your frequency? Like, that's an important skill, I think.
It is. And I think one is just observing, right? And just as I described in the beginning of the interview, when I was kind of having my brain highly active and hyperactive, observe the things around you, observe where your body is holding on the frequency, observe what's happening around you. So I think observation to me is awareness is the bridge to consciousness. So when you are aware, you start to really understand the who, what, when, where, and why of something. And then the second thing that I believe, and this is my own belief system, Derek, compassion, right? So even when I identified that I was in my head and that I was overthinking, I brought compassion to it. And to me, the physical shifting from my head to my heart was me giving compassion to myself in the situation, which opened up my ability to be a witness. And then from there, bring harmony and awareness so that I can make another choice. But I think to your point, Derek, it's so important to be practiced, whether it's breath work, whether it's meditation, whether it's exercise. A practice of being kind to yourself is going to build that muscle where you can navigate out of any rabbit hole. And trust, I go there, we all go there. But when you know that by extending kindness to yourself is going to bring you to a place of higher frequency, I believe that just helps to make you much more intentional and practiced around all of this.
Amazing. Trey, thank you for sharing your wisdom. Thanks for sharing your heart and mind with the audience today. How can people connect with you, learn more about your work, interact with you, collaborate with you?
Yeah, so reach out to me on LinkedIn. I'm still building my business, so I don't have a website and such yet, but I'm in the process of working through that. But reach out to me on LinkedIn. I'm Tramayne, Trey Whitney. I would love to get feedback on this session or hear any of your thoughts as it relates to this leadership journey, peak experiences, and how we can start to elevate the systems within the workplace through really having a focus on light, shadow, and wholeness.
Amazing. Thank you, Trey. We appreciate you. And thank you to our listeners and our guests always. Have a wonderful day.
Thank you.